eating the same bratwurst and sausages and doing the same things, having our Oktoberfests. Like, why don't we all come together? Why don't we make one country? That's what they wanted to do. So similarly, the German-speaking people, they want to combine their separate states to form one united nation. Italian-speaking people of Italy want to do the same. The language similarities were a huge, huge deal. Yeah, the unification of Italy successfully combined separate states to form one united nation in 1870. This effort was achieved due to the efforts of three devoted nationalists. This included Giuseppe Garibaldi, Giuseppe Mazzini, and Count Camillo de Cavour. Unification of Germany was done pretty much in 1871 because of one man, Otto von Bismarck. He used the blood and iron policy, which is just pretty much 3 wars to unify German land. They wanted to get that done, and they were going to do it through blood and iron. They were not messing around there. So pretty intense in Europe as those two countries formed. Meanwhile, there was some nationalism brewing in old empires, including Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire were both large empires that ruled over many diverse groups of people, so they didn't have that one kind of cultural identity that Germany and Italy were looking for. Due to feelings of nationalism, ethnic minorities wanted to gain independence and form their own nations. Austria and Hungary and the Ottoman Empire were eventually broken up due to nationalist movements by these different ethnic groups. It kind of happened after World War I concluded, in the case of Austria-Hungary at least. Nationalism in Ireland also began in 1801 with the potato famine, 1845 and 1850. 1801, Great Britain took over Ireland, first of all. Then, 1845, 1850, the potato famine began, where about 1 million Irish had a famine, and the potato crop failed to grow. Just awful, awful situation. Over 1 million Irish people migrated to the United States to escape the famine and find more opportunities. That kind of led to discrimination for them as well. And it was just really kind of an awful situation there. The British, they had a lot of opportunities really to kind of stop this, but they just didn't really seem to care, and really Irish people kind of just starving and ignored over in their little corner of the world there. Not really too much of concern to the burgeoning British Empire. Due to feelings of nationalism, many people in Ireland did not want to be ruled by Great Britain. They wanted independence or self-government. South Ireland was mostly Protestant and gained independence from Great Britain. North Ireland identified more with Britain. They were mostly Protestant, so they remained part of Great Britain, and this split still exists to this day. Imperialism. We're turning now to imperialism here, also called colonization. It's when a strong country conquers and takes over a weaker country. The area is also known, the taken over area is also known as a colony. Many European nations, also called Western nations, such as Great Britain, France, and Germany, and Italy, also took over lands throughout Asia and Africa. They went crazy in the 19th century, the 1800s. Many Europeans imperialized for several reasons. They wanted raw materials and natural resources like coal, tin, or iron in order to make goods in their industrializing factories. It's kind of a supply and demand situation. I mean, they were running out of stuff in their own land, and they just had to expand. Another reason kind of was racism. With the white man's burden kind of philosophy, or the social Darwinism beliefs, which I get to in a minute. This was kind of a racist moment that Europe encouraged Europeans to civilize or help improve the people that they took over by teaching them European customs and religious beliefs like Christianity. The poem referred to the people of Asia and Africa as half devil and half child. So they pretty much said, we need to tame these people, we need to get them out of their dark, backwards, and twisted ways and teach them a Western way of seeing things, right? So read them the Bible, teach them English and kind of their culture that they had in the first place, kind of goes out the window. Social Darwinism was the idea that it was natural for strong countries like the European nations to take over weaker countries like Africa and Asia, kind of survival of the fittest. That's the way things should be. And there's a lot of stuff to go through here in imperialism in India, China, and Africa. So Europeans generally had a very negative impact on the regions that they colonized or took over in India, China, and Africa. They kind of sucked them dry for resources, and the people there were just kind of left hanging in the breeze. Over 90% of Africa was taken over by European countries that kind of scrambled or raced the continent. Instead, this is the big thing, instead of having a bloody conflict that would hurt the countries, they met in a big meeting called the Berlin Conference, and they decided where Africa, who's going to get what in Africa. They said, okay, Belgium, you're going to get the Congo. Britain, you're going to get South Africa, so on, so on, so on. So that kind of really helps the European countries by avoiding the conflicts, stopping them from sapping their own resources, fighting each other, and making sure that they were focused on getting the most amount of resources possible away from the African land that was there and profiting the most off of that. So in China, the British began smuggling opium, which is an addictive drug, into China, and the Chinese fought back with the famous Opium Wars. After being defeated, China was carved into spheres of influence, where areas where trade was controlled by different European nations, and this kind of was a big thing because China had originally said, no, we do not want to trade with the West in any way. Britain especially was kind of at a loss. They didn't know what to do, and then all of a sudden they started to smuggle opium, and it really hit China incredibly, incredibly hard. People were just completely China was knocked down by it, kneecapped by it in a huge way. So many people were addicted. China kind of asked them to stop. It's like, just don't do this, guys. And keep in mind, China, before Europe and Britain came in, they were at the top of their game. They were incredibly successful, incredibly powerful and prosperous, and this really crippled them. They asked them to stop. Britain said, no way, this is good. This is crippling your country. You guys need to trade with us if we want to stop, because Britain was confined to a small island outside of China where they had to trade, and then China was like, okay, we're going to go to war. Britain, they had much better ships and guns and stuff like that. That's all been invented at this time, and China won the Opium Wars, carving England won the European Wars. The Opium Wars, and things were carved up, spheres of influence, and spheres of influence are not taking over the country, not colonizing the country, but areas in the country where trade was controlled by different European nations. China pretty much had no say in where the own resources of their country went, and thus began China's century of humiliation. Losing the Opium Wars, getting the West all up in this business, and things did not go well from there. India was taken over by Great Britain and ruled for almost 200 years. The people of Africa and Asia did not like being ruled by European nations. As a result, fought many wars to kick the Europeans out and gain independence. One included the Sepoy Mutiny, which was a rebellion in which India tried but failed to gain independence from Great Britain. Things, again, heated up after that. The British government kind of took control from the East India Trading Company, which was originally associated with the British government, but now the British government itself had to come in, take control after the Sepoy Mutiny, and kind of enforce stricter rules. Indians were for a long time treated like second-class citizens in their own country. It was very harsh, and India was the crown jewel, meanwhile, for Great Britain, and they were incredibly profitable on it, and it was a very, very beneficial situation for them. Boxer Rebellion was a rebellion in which China tried but failed to gain independence from various European nations that controlled them. That was very rough for them. It was a group that didn't really have the full support of the emperor powers there, but many Chinese were very unhappy with their kind of Western, not occupation, but influence, where they controlled a lot of the trade and spheres of influence, and they didn't want to come into China because it's just too much to deal with these spheres of influence for them, because they were still profiting, worked out perfectly fine for them. All right, imperialism in Japan. From 1600 to 1854, Japan was incredibly isolated and wanted little contact with the rest of the world. In 1854, Commodore Matthew Perry of the United States sailed right into Japan in order to open up the country to trade. We wanted to do business at the time with Japan. This was the Meiji Restoration. So this was the kind of response to Commodore Matthew Perry, because Commodore Matthew Perry was like, open up or we'll open you up for yourselves. Like this is like, we need to get this open very, very quickly. That's what the U.S. wanted to do. They wanted to be the first country to get to Japan, because Britain, they already got in China. A lot of other European countries had holes in Africa. Everyone was making money after this imperialism racket, And the United States wanted to do it too. So they tried to go to Japan. They kind of made an idle threat. If we, not so idle threat, if we don't come back, if we come back and you're not ready to receive us for trade, we are going to have to pull a opium war type situation on you and force you to open up. So the Japanese, especially the people in power there, did not respond well to that. They began the Meiji Restoration. This was the incredible period of modernization from 1868 to 1912. They industrialized, they built factories, machines, road communications, and they westernized as well, adopting the customs and techniques of the Western government, such as Europe and the United States. They improved its military, government, education system, technology, and make it more like those of Europe and the United States. As a result of these changes made during the Meiji period, Japan became a powerful and modern industrial country. Instead of being taken over by Europeans or the United States, Japan actually started to imperialize countries on its own. Now that Japan had these factories, thanks to its westernization and modernization and industrialization during the Meiji Restoration, it needed to take over and get some raw resources for those factories like coal, tin, iron, and lead to make some products to sell on the market. Since Japan had very few natural resources of its own, it turned to imperialism, taking over Korea and part of China, Manchuria, to gain those resources. So that's kind of all you need to know about imperialism, nationalism, industrial revolution, political revolutions, and the Enlightenment. So that's probably all we'll talk about for now. We'll continue to go down the list of things you need to know, and before long, let you get you all caught up. This is our Regents Review series. Thank you so much for listening. Look for posts on my social media about when our next episode will be coming out. All right, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Global.